thanks so much for coming this morning, braving the weather. I'm honestly not sure if I would have braved the weather today unless otherwise, but I really appreciate being here, and my family and I have appreciated being members of this congregation for a long time now, over 20 years, raised our boys here, and for those of you who haven't been here 20 years, this is a congregation that has just regenerated itself in so many ways with wonderful, wonderful people, so it's great to be a part of it through all of these years. So what I thought I might do today is just talk for a few minutes. I don't want to talk too long. I don't have a PowerPoint or a speech or anything like that. I just wanted to maybe give an overview of things, and then, this is still kind of, it's really sensitive, that's good. Maybe give an overview of things and where things kind of sit right now in the community from a crime standpoint, a safety standpoint. I'll touch on a few things our office does, and that might generate some interest in questions or conversation. And then I really would like to open it up to any questions you have or comments or criticisms. I'm used to taking criticisms too, so I welcome that as well. So we have an office, as you saw, of 125 prosecutors that I lead. I have 175 other support staff, which are victim witness, social workers, essentially, paralegals, investigators, and then important clerical staff who really make the system, make our system run in our office. We review probably downtown, we have 3/4 of our staff, and then some of you may know we review children's cases out at the Children's Court Center in Wauwatosa. So that's out on Watertown Plank Road. We do delinquencies, but we also do, unlike many other counties, we actually look at children in need of protective services. So we work with the Bureau of Child Welfare, and we do termination of parental rights cases. Those are all civil cases, but they relate to the welfare and abuse and neglect of children in our community. So that's a piece of our office that a lot of people don't know that we do that's civil, but it's very important because, of course, as we know, children who grow up in difficult households often grow up and have difficult adulthoods, right? And that's a challenge that we see sometimes families from the very early stages to some unfortunate ends for some people. So we have people across the spectrum working in this space. We review probably over 30,000 matters in our office a year. This year we'll have issued about 17,000 cases that are criminal in nature. So that's felonies, it's misdemeanors, it's traffic crimes like OWI offenses, fleeing offenses by vehicle, and then we have a number of juvenile offenses we issue, of course, throughout the year. And then, of course, the TPR cases. So about 17,000 matters. That doesn't include things like traffic tickets. We review not most municipal tickets, but we do like things from the Sheriff's Department because they're part of Milwaukee County. So we look at those matters too. So we literally look at anything ranging from a speeding ticket on the freeway to homicide cases. Our office is divided up into units. So like a law firm, we have attorneys that specialize in certain things, and we have found that helps really get the best work out of people, and we have people with experience who they have become subject matter experts in their fields, and actually many of our folks are in demand statewide and nationally even to lecture on different topics ranging from child abuse to sexual assault to domestic violence to homicide. So we're lucky to have so many great resources in our office, and it's from my standpoint, it's an honor to work with these people because they're really tremendous. They're really tremendous. We're filled with tremendous people who care about this community a great deal. I know sometimes people who work in public service or in government get maligned, and I think unnecessarily so. But I can tell you, I'm aware of 300 people who work in this office who really deeply care about this community and work very hard at it. So what's the status of things in our city right now and in the county? Crime generally down. I think the perspective. Boy, we must be ground zero for everything. We must be the worst at everything. And I sometimes I feel like, we have a lot of pride in this community. We care about this community. So then when things aren't going well, we're angry about it here, and rightfully so. I will say what I'm telling you really is our national trends in just about every city that experienced high levels of crime during the pandemic, violent crime in particular. And we saw people engaging in crime. Their first offense might be an attempt homicide. I mean, it was the scale of crime and people literally going from 0 to 100 in terms of the type of activity they were engaging in. That was unique. That was something we hadn't really seen as much of. And so crime continues to decline from what are record highs. No question about it. That's important to note. For example, non-fatal shootings are down 40% from what they were 2 years ago, but 2 years ago they were at 700. That's a lot of people being shot in the community, right? And this year we're going to be somewhere in the 400s. Far too many. I mean, there's no satisfactory amount, I think that's right. It's fair to say, right? So this is never intended to be good news at all, because there's plenty of work to be done. I can tell you from the perspective of being in the office for a long time, 10 years ago or 12 years ago, we had homicide rates. This year we'll be in the 140s or something. Several years ago, we were over 200 for 3 years in a row. We had never seen 200 homicides in this community, and we had it for 3 years in a row here. So homicides are up a little this year from last year. Again, far too many, because I can think of a time 10, 12 years ago when we had a year of 70 and a year of 90. And we felt like there was progress, real progress being made due to a lot of the collaborative efforts in our community. And we're trying to get back to that place. But some things are different now than they were, 10 or 12 years ago. And I think what I would highlight are the fact that I'm not sure we've gotten out of the COVID malaise. I think every community still is struggling with this sense of isolation that people feel. And isolation, of course, can be a trigger for all sorts of behavior that's antisocial. I think that we've got a number of people who haven't accessed the services in a way they should that are available to them. We've talked about this extensively in the domestic violence space, where we have really tried to encourage people to come back to a place like Sojourner, a world-class operation that provide top-flight services, and other entities like Sojourner in the community for domestic violence. And it's getting people back into this sense of being part of the community, because that feeling of isolation, especially if you're in the DV situation, it can literally be deadly. And the lack of feeling of community, I think, among young people is still at a high. We see high rates of anxiety, depression. A number of students. I was just at a meeting last week with a number of leaders in the community around absenteeism in schools, right? What's it been? It peaked during the pandemic. It's gone down some, but it's still above pre-pandemic levels. So that is a big concern here. We cannot have kids not in school, right? That is just the biggest predictor of where they'll end up moving down the road. So, a lot of work has to go into how do we get people re-engaged as part of a community and feeling like they're part of a community. Some of that is it truly is psychological. And we have a number of people in our community, like in every other city in America right now, that don't feel connected to anything. We have to work on that. And that's a community lift in general, I think. So it's a matter of seeing progress, but knowing we have plenty of work to do. There's plenty of work to be done here. Now, having said that, I think we have a lot of assets here. I think we have a lot of relationships here that many other communities don't have. We have, for example, on the law enforcement side, you have a lot of good work, good collaborative work that goes on between all the law enforcement agencies in suburbs and the city and the sheriff and all of those folks. They work together really well, which is a good thing. I'm sorry, this is not, I might try to hold this. They work really well together, which is a good thing. In many other communities, that doesn't happen. So we have a level of collaboration among public safety professionals, which is very, very good. I think you don't have a lot of acrimony at the local level here in this county among elected officials too much. I think the principals in a lot of these places, the mayor, the county executive, certainly my office. We work together very, very well around problems, and we're thinking globally around issues. So it's not like we think, well, that's a crime problem, so that's the DA's problem. We're all together around issues that intersect public safety and public health, and that's because we know that all of these things work together. Like I would say, what would be the best solution to public safety in our community long term, and that would be an improved economy, like understanding that there are meaningful job opportunities for everybody who can access them, and housing stability. Okay, well, so what's going on in our housing? There are lots of things like that, these conversations that go on that and they're more than that. There's a lot of activity going on around issues like homelessness. As an example, 10 years ago, we had an increase in panhandling downtown and in other parts of the community. The issue really became one of some safety concern, and so I and others got together with the county housing department and worked on how to get people into stable housing. It's nothing glamorous, but it is people struggling with their mental health that have put them on the street, panhandling them, that is causing people to feel unsafe, right? So it's comes in as a safety issue, and it's really a mental health housing issue. So examples like that are what we do, I think, really well in this community, and I think give me cause for why we have the ability to move through the difficult time that I think we're still sitting in. I mean, a lot of other big cities, frankly, large cities, are struggling with, that ability to get people in a room together and can be very territorial. We can be that way a little, but not much. I think there's a strong desire here in this community to work on problems. And you can assemble in a room together like this, the people you would need to work on it to tackle a tough problem. So I think we've seen that done here. We have to just continue to work on that. So a couple other things I'll mention, and then we can open it up to a little more conversation. Reckless driving, of course, Seth mentioned that, because that's the thing I hear about more than anything. And I will tell you, I spend a lot of my time in areas of the city most impacted by crime. Okay, so this would be neighborhoods straight to the west of us, is where I probably intersect with most people around public safety in my job, and they're even saying that. I mean, these are the areas of the city most impacted by gun violence, and reckless driving is clearly still at the forefront of everyone's mind. And in some ways, I think it's because we've all seen it, we've all witnessed it, it intersects the entire region, and the incidents of it are going down, and yet the visibility of it all is still so high that it's of deep concern to people. And so what do we do in our office? Again, I will tell you, it's a fairly reactive approach to it. I mean, in terms of what we recommend, and that's always some level of incarceration in response to that. And that's really because the areas of the city most impacted by crime have said to me loudly and clearly, look, we need a break from this. We need a break from people who are constantly threatening our safety each and every day. Do something about it. And the fact is, that's what we do. I don't control the sentencing of cases, and I assume most people do know that, but we make recommendations. We make recommendations as to bail, as to sentencing, and then we have a number of judges who make the decisions. So that's and it's a good system in the sense that you have the different branches of government intersecting in the criminal justice system. We're enforcing the laws passed by the legislature and signed by the governor, and the judiciary is making decisions about the cases we bring into the system. So it's not to point a finger at anyone, but it is to say, this is what we're doing, this is what I can control, and there are things, honestly, beyond my control. But what I keep telling my people is, the community has said loud and clear that in response to violent crime, in response to reckless driving, which I consider to be a crime of violence, they want a strong response. They want strong recommendations from us, and we have to do that regardless of what the ultimate outcome in the case is, which is something we don't control. So that is my philosophy on it, and our folks are pretty steadfast in that, because I've been pretty emphatic about that, and they understand too. I think that they're hearing a lot from the community as well around people's concern for their safety. The other thing I thought I would mention as we talk about the gun violence, one of the things that's also changed, I talked about the malaise of COVID. The other thing that's changed in our community and in every community when it comes to gun violence, which will make it more difficult, is the prevalence of essentially automatic level weapons everywhere. So some of my early work in the office was prosecuting gun violence, and it was very rare that you would see an automatic weapon. Like literally an automatic weapon that would just fire multiple rounds with the one squeeze of a trigger. That was very rare, and today those are ubiquitous. Just with the addition of a switch onto a weapon, onto a handgun that can make it turn a semi-auto weapon into an automatic weapon. And all I'm saying is there's the impact of that. I mean, the impact of that is at scenes now, police officers will tell you, at a shooting scene where they might have found a handful of casings before, they will find dozens of casings. So in some ways, it's almost amazing that the amount of non-fatal shootings is still going down in a fairly dramatic way, considering the level of firepower is very, very high. And I'll tell you, the people who are really, I think, experts in this, who have real insight, are young people growing up in our city. And I was at a mentoring event, back in the summertime, and listening to a number of young people who are very engaged in their high school. They're very engaged in, extracurricular activities, whether it's a mentoring group or their Boys and Girls Club or whatever it is in their school. I mean, they really are, against many odds that they're encountering in their lives, the best of what this community or any community could offer. They would be people young people that anyone could be proud of. And what they put together a little summary of things they wanted to see around violence, and one of them was, the automatic ability to have automatic weapons is a big, big problem for us. The other thing they're asking for, I think, which I think is a reasonable thing around, the issue of violence, is if we're trying to keep, firearms out of the hands of people who shouldn't possess them, what they're asking for is a restoration of some, amount of a waiting period in the purchase of a gun, but also then the ability of family members to petition to a court. These are called red flag laws, to petition to a court when a loved one is in duress, to have the court intervene and prohibit a person from carrying weapons. Now look, I think everybody understands realistically, none of those things themselves are a cure. We all know that. I mean, the fact is that people can mail order the parts they need to assemble a semi-automatic firearm like a Lego set today. So it's a different world we're living in. But I just think it's important to hear at least the perspective of young people in this community who are growing up surrounded by violence and who want to see something done about it, and think these are things that are reasonable, that would help, at least would help. The other thing they talk about, and we, I work in this space pretty extensively, is again around this sort of sense of community lacking. I referred to this earlier, this sense that people don't feel like they're part of something. They really see the need to continue to invest in the resources that are there for young people, and they see it firsthand. I mean, they know exactly what's there for them, and what they'd like to see more of. And I think that they are almost subject matter experts in what they think would heal our community. Just things to think about. I certainly advocate for all of those, and yet I think I'm getting it from experts actually in their lived experience. So I talked a little bit about how we, our approach on all the things that you read about are fairly traditional. So what I mean by that is, we have a robust response to firearm violence. The challenge with prosecuting that can be sometimes we don't have cooperating witnesses. That's a challenge in neighborhoods where people sometimes would rather settle the score themselves than avail themselves of the justice system. That's a reality we deal with. We have an outstanding sensitive crimes unit that handles sexual assault cases. Again, from the traditional standpoint, you get a very, very assertive response from this office. Again, sexual assault, perhaps the most underreported crime in America. Homicide unit, we have tremendous prosecutors who do this work day in and day out and achieve the results that ought to be achieved in the courtroom after the worst type of offense happens. On the other side of the spectrum, and I think this falls under the umbrella of what I would call accountability, that we all have to one another, but that the system has to our community, is that accountability can take the form also at the other end of the spectrum of a treatment court, for example. We have a drug treatment court for people with serious addictions. In the last year, at my urging, our chief judge created a mental health treatment court because we have so many folks right now that are struggling with their mental health who are maybe most often not committing the most serious offenses, but are coming into the system over and over and over again, and we're trying to get them channeled into the healthcare system to the best we can. So that's a good option for us. We have a number of other people who come in, commit low-level offenses, and we probably have 1,500 of these cases now from the year that will be about what we did last year, of people who go through what we call an early intervention unit, or project. This would be low-level offenses, nonviolent. If a victim's involved, like let's say for a theft or something like that, it's always with victim consent. But these are the opportunities we give to people to pay restitution and move on, or do community service, or to avoid the worst outcome they could avoid for themselves in the criminal justice system. And we have found actually that by identifying those folks, they're at a low risk level based on some assessments we do that aren't perfect, but they're guides at least that we have on their history and on what is predicted to be their rate of reoffense. Again, not perfect, but in these cases, we've seen a lot of success. We've seen a lot of folks complete the program, in the 85 percentile or so, and many not ever coming back to reoffend at a serious level. So I think that's a good way to use resources. Use the expensive resources we have more toward the violent offenses that we have, and find a level of accountability that's appropriate for people who essentially learned from that experience and are not reoffending. So I think it's good to have that array of responses. So I think with that, I might stop right there and start taking questions. I think the last thing I would say is, yeah, Steve, you have one? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. First of all, thank you for coming to talk to us.
Okay.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
And my question is a two-part question, really. The first part is a jurisdictional question. Let's say there's a homicide in the city of Milwaukee. Which office, your county and office and staff, the city attorney's office and staff, the U.S. attorney's office and staff, what determines who prosecutes that case, that homicide? And related to that, to what extent and in what ways does your office collaborate with those other offices, the attorney, U.S. attorney, in fighting crime, in both the prevention side as well as the punishment side?
Okay, great question. So the question is, how does our office, the Milwaukee County District Attorney's Office, intersect with the United States Attorney's Office, the federal prosecuting authority in this part of the state or in our community, as well as the Milwaukee City Attorney's Office, which handles just the city of Milwaukee, but of course there are municipal attorneys representing all the suburbs here too. So for example, in a homicide case, homicides are handled by my office. They're handled by the district attorney's office. The city attorney, Milwaukee City Attorney, handles municipal level offenses. So they would handle citations issued by the Milwaukee Police Department. Not criminal charges, but citations. Traffic, nuisance citations. They handle a bunch of civil cases, of course, representing the city in civil actions as well. So I'll give you an example of where we work closely with the city attorney's office. We have a number of attorneys in our office as prosecutors who work in our community partnership unit. So for years, we have 8 prosecutors working in neighborhoods in the city of Milwaukee that correspond with the districts, the police districts, how the city is divided by police district. And we have an extra one on the near west side that was funded by Marquette and Potawatomi and Miller Coors and Aurora Sinai. So they work in that neighborhood. But what we do with the city attorney that's really helpful from a crime prevention standpoint in neighborhoods is the city attorney might determine that a house is vacant and is becoming a nuisance for one reason or another. And so the city attorney can, through its Department of Neighborhood Services, they can visit the house, they can board it up, they can slate it for demolition. I mean, they can do a lot of things that can clean up that house. Our community prosecutor is involved with them as well then by prosecuting somebody who needs to be prosecuted or by essentially gathering the neighborhood together around the issues that they're seeing. So our prosecutor works in the neighborhood they're assigned to all the time, and sometimes there are issues that the city attorney can handle from a licensing standpoint on a business, from a nuisance standpoint on a house that ought to be boarded up and locked up so it's not used for drugs or prostitution or something else. And then our office is there in the event something needs to come to the criminal system, but more as a backstop to all of it to say, look, here's the next step if the behavior, if that house is, violated again by somebody engaged in harmful activity. So that's how we engage with the city attorney's office every single day. The U.S. attorney's office, they have a number of cases that they'll handle that can span beyond Milwaukee County. So it's the Eastern District of Wisconsin that the U.S. Attorney's Office staffs, which is the entire eastern part of this state. And so almost by that nature, the type of crime they handle might expand from Milwaukee to Racine to Kenosha to Sheboygan. I mean, it can be, they're very good at handling larger scale, multi-jurisdictional, multi-county type of operations or groups working together. That's really what they do. They probably specialize in that. They specialize in a lot of really high-level financial crime as well. We do some financial crime. Our local police departments don't have the capacity to investigate a lot of that, given the demands on their daily work from the violent crime side. They do some of it here at the local level. And so when you think about, and the U.S. Attorney's Office does other groups of people for whom, who may be working as a gang together or a number of offenses for which they might want to secure, a minimum mandatory sentence that, we don't have minimum mandatory sentences in Wisconsin law under state law. So there could be someone who's got a long criminal history that the U.S. Attorney's Office would like to prosecute based on that history. But I would say that historically we've always had a very good working relationship with all of those offices. I mean, any of them reach out to me at any given time, and so that's another example of, I think, how we all work together. Yes?
Lately, there have been ICE people showing up in Democratic-controlled cities that have Latino or immigrant population. Milwaukee County has a certain area in Milwaukee where there's a lot of Mexicans and Latin American people. Does Milwaukee County have any plan or a program to protect the citizens who are peacefully protesting the ICE appearance and driving people off the street? Because I've seen on Facebook and other things where they get out of their car, they pepper spray people who are standing there protesting these actions. Does Milwaukee County have a plan to protect people who are peacefully protesting?
Well, what I can tell you is that we fortunately haven't been a focus of it here yet, as in many other cities. The number of cases we've seen in our court system has been fairly small to date. There's no question in my mind that the police department, Milwaukee Police Department, Milwaukee Sheriff's Department, have been in contact with each other constantly around ensuring, just as they would, I think, even prior to what we've seen this last year. They're very good at least in my view, of ensuring that public demonstrations are conducted safely. There's a lot of forbearance, I think, with regard to how people wish to demonstrate publicly. From my viewpoint, I know there's been a lot of work or discussion among the law enforcement agencies because they would be the ones at the ground level trying to keep the peace. It's certainly an issue everyone's aware of. There's no question about that. Yes?
Hi, Allison Larkin. Just through the media, it seems that there are a lot of adolescents that are getting weapons in their hands, and they're the ones that are ripping off the cars and causing accidents. Instead of just putting them into the cog of, juvenile detention, is there any other thing so they don't get forgotten or, repeat their offenses?
Yeah, that's the space where you'd like to make the difference, right? Would be at the young age. So, someone who's a kid, and the one thing to remember is you're a juvenile in Wisconsin until the age of 17. So it's interesting. You're an adult for criminal prosecution at the age of 17. I don't know what other adult privilege you have at the age of 17 except the privilege of being prosecuted in adult court. But that's a state by state. Many of you probably know that. Every criminal set of criminal justice standard varies from state to state to state, and even probably some differences within our own state about how different things are prioritized, I'm sure, given the level of things we see here that are different than other counties. So to answer your question, many young people who come in at the early stages who may be a passenger, for example, in a vehicle, they have an opportunity usually through the children's court that also works not only our office, not only does our office have a presence there, but also the county, Milwaukee County Department of Health and Human Services, has a big footprint in the Children's Court Center. And that's by design. Under state law, juvenile justice is first coordinated by every county's Department of Health and Human Services. So social workers are involved in that case from the beginning, and there are a number of programs that the county has established just in the last couple of years to go along with groups like, for example, Running Rebels is a long-time nonprofit in this community that his focus is just directly on teenagers. And that's been a really good program, I think, over the decades that has saved teenagers' lives and saved them from progressing through the system. Could we use more of that? We could. I don't think there's any question about that. There have been other programs that have been brought to Milwaukee that are all around. It's the same type of approach in the sense of how do we build within young people a sense that there are people in our community they can align with who are positive influences. And it's the same. I think we know all of us want to be part of a community, and young people in particular, We'll find a community one way or the other. They'll find one that's positive or they'll find one that's negative. And a lot of this type of behavior we saw really explode during the pandemic, and social media contributes to it. So there is a lot of, there is a lot of attention paid to what can we do to keep the kid in the juvenile system and from graduating into the adult system, because that's the ultimate thing we want to avoid. Could we use more of it? We absolutely could. I was in front of the Greater Milwaukee Committee recently, and they asked about, the question I was asked was if I could, if there were millions of dollars to be invested in public safety, what would I invest it in? And, would it be to my office or to police or to, we're short police too. I mean, but there's money for that right now. That's a different issue. There are just vacancies in the police department right now, in every police department nationwide. It's not just Milwaukee. But what would I invest money in? I'd invest money in the programs that are pulling kids into them right now in a positive way, because that's what we need. We've got too many young people that have literally fallen off the grid, and some fell out of their school environment or fell out of whatever it was that kept them engaged when they were in school during the pandemic. Others, of course, have had very, very difficult, trauma-filled lives, from an early age on. And so, these aren't easy, as we know, situations, but I do think, I'm sorry, what'd you say? Right, that's a good point. So what Dolly just said is, and I'm sorry, the question, I should have repeated the question for the audience. I'm just not handling this thing well, I don't think. Yeah. So the question was, how do we keep juveniles from, cycling just through repeatedly through the carceral system that we have, through the detention center, and what are the options for them to try to avoid staying in the system? And I would love to see more investment in programs that I know work. And frankly, an area a group that I work a lot with are people who have re-entered the community from being in the prison system, and many of them are adults now. These are really could be some of the best role models for young people, because they've had that lived experience growing up in the city, the barriers put in front of them, going to prison, some of them for very serious things, and many of them have come back out of that experience wanting to really give back to the community. And those are voices that are very powerful, I think certainly more than mine, with regard to what a young person might listen to and be impressed by. So I would love to see more investment in that space.
What are
Yes?
three programs that are working?
Sure, well, Running Rebels is a good, so the question was, what are 3 programs that are working? Running Rebels is one that I mentioned. Certainly our Boys and Girls Clubs, for those who don't know, it's the largest Boys and Girls Clubs conglomeration in the nation, actually, here in Milwaukee, and that for a long time has worked very, very well. And again, not everyone, some kids may not gravitate toward that. So like the Running Rebels is maybe for kids who've already been in the system a little bit and need to work their way through and are attracted to just a pure sort of sports approach. There's an organized group called Strive 365 right now that's been around here locally for about 6 or 7 years. Similar to Running Rebels, they're in schools now and they're recruiting young people to basically engage through physical activity, through a lot of things they're organizing around physical activity, regardless of what your skill set is. The whole idea is you sort of need to build your whole self, and that's a good way to stay connected to other people, build yourself up in a healthy way, and hopefully have a better mindset as well. Those are 3 off the top of my head, but there are multitudes of great programs we have in the community that are doing good work. All of them right now are probably struggling more than ever for some funds, because some, of course, get funding from the federal government, which is tighter this year. So you could invest in a number of things. And the last thing I would say in that space is the county and the city both have invested in violence prevention work that is at the county level for the juveniles. That's what I was referring to a few minutes ago. So that's through Milwaukee County, and these are groups that are, with probably some of the most trauma-filled youth right now that are somehow skirting on the edge of being in the system, and maybe they are in close proximity to violent crime, and they're seeing it, and they're right there trying to decide which way they're going to end up, right? And so that's an important You know, they've got, some of it was ARPA funded that started those programs, and some of it has been now further invested in by the county. The city has violence interrupters. Medical college has violence interrupters, literally at hospitals right now. So you know, the gunshot victims go to Freighter, to the trauma center, and people then gather at the hospital and decide what to do next in response to that, right? And so you have violence interrupters literally from the hospital trying to diffuse some retaliatory act for the person that was brought in. I mean, it's that type of work happening at the ground level each and every day in this community that honestly is preventing homicides. I mean, it's preventing shootings from happening, but it's hard work. You talk to these individuals engaged in this work, the amount of stress, and they're literally mediating among people who are very angry, who are feeling unheard, who are feeling isolated, I mean, it's a very tough space to be in, but critical. In my view, it's critically important, and we ought to think about the work they're doing as part of the public safety continuum. You know, if we think about public safety as just police, prosecutors, judges, corrections, we've started too late. I mean, we all ought to be concerned about it, and to the extent any of us, you know, can have some level of investment in it, it's something we all ought to care about, but certainly, you know, the police get involved once that 911 call happens, right? Something bad has happened then to require the police response. We have to be much further upstream every day around our thinking about how to make ourselves safer and healthier. Yes?
I have a question to do with fully automatic weapons, which you started talking about
Yeah.
toward the beginning. So, correct me if I'm wrong, those are not allowed to the general population who want to hunt or protect their home and so on and so forth. But they're out there in huge numbers. And I think there already is a background check if you want to go get them that's needed in the military, maybe some police forces. But the criminals have easy access to that. So it doesn't matter if you add more gun laws, they will still be able to get them. You say, I can't have them. People on my end won't have them, but the criminals will still have them.
Yep.
So, and there's a big difference between a fully automatic weapon and a semi-automatic weapon. So what do you do with people who are so negative and have suffered so much harm in all these years, and they have easy access to those? I'm not in favor of anyone in the general population having them, but they're still going to have them. So what do you do about that?
Yeah.
Those are the most deadly. You can
Yeah.
kill someone with a revolver or anything, but those are the most deadly.
Yeah, and you've just identified really the practical conundrum we're in here, right, at the end of the day. Because you're right, everything you said, Margaret, is exactly right. The question was, I'm sorry for the online group, is, you know, so what laws, there are already laws that prohibit automatic weapons in the state. We know that. We prosecute more people for them than ever before now. But what's that, you know, people who want to have a gun with a mindset of doing harm with that to somebody else, or because they feel like they need to protect themselves and are armed with this, what can be done about that at the end of the day? So many trauma-filled people have access to firearms, is I think what you're saying. And that is the problem. And even as you talk to young people in the city, they see that. I mean, this is why I would say I would invest, you know, 10 times the amount we are as a community right now in all of these types of programs that are meeting people at the ground level before something bad happens. Because we have too many people who are filled with trauma, and more people than we have jail cell beds and hospital beds for them. That's a fact. And that's a fact everywhere. You know, again, I never want to make it sound like, boy, we are just the worst of the worst here. Because we have challenges here, and we have to recognize them. I just think that you're right. We don't, until we change the mindset that so many young people are operating with right now, who are growing up without any sense of hope in their lives, their future is bleak, and anyone they encounter is. It's very, very simple, right? We all know this. It's if you don't have some feeling of self-esteem or feeling that you're meaningful, you won't regard anyone else in that light either. And we have a wide swath of individuals in our community feeling that way right now. And so, you know, again, as you think about what it is you like to support that are doing things for children, it's something that's very, very important to continue to invest in, because these are the spaces that I just can't say enough. I've been in the nonprofit space for a long time as a board member, and our nonprofit community really is a pretty powerful force here. In some neighborhoods, it really is the backbone of neighborhoods, and it can't be taken lightly here. It's really hard to measure the number of people whose lives have been turned around because of these entities in our community, and I really view them as public safety assets, because that's what they are. Yes, in the back.
Question from the chat. Is there any examples of like bipartisan efforts that have made like a positive impact?
So the question is bipartisan efforts that are making a positive impact. Well, I would say this. I would say I think there's deep concern around mental health that crosses all lines. There's an increasing concern about drug addiction in ways that I think wasn't the case years ago. The question is, what does that translate to in terms of investment? That's always the question, right? I think there's strong sentiment across, no matter who you vote for, that these are important issues that need to be addressed. The question is how to best do that, and what the level of investment should be in that. And that, I think, is always subject to debate, I think. I will say that, for my part, I spent a lot of time in Madison. This is a little bit off the topic, but related to bipartisanship, I would say. I think the Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson and County Executive David Crowley really worked hard in the last 2 or 3 years to improve the relationship between Milwaukee County, and the state. And I think they've made a lot of progress in that regard. I was over there this spring because we had 10% of our prosecutors on the chopping block, not because the state was going to cut them, but because so much of my office over the years has been federally grant funded, and so we had some federal grant dollars expiring, and that's 12 and a half prosecutors. 10% of my legal staff was slated to be cut this summer, and I don't know anyone who wants to see that happen, whether you live in Milwaukee County or all the counties surrounding us that are concerned about crime in Milwaukee, right? So that was my pitch to a number of folks who I talked to in the legislature on both sides of the aisle. And fortunately, it was well received by everyone, and they found a way forward to fund those positions. So I think there is possibility, for continued collaboration in this space, and we just have to keep working at it. And again, I would say in that space, this was an example of how David Crowley in this space helped me a great deal. I mean, he and I went together to talk to a number of people with whom he'd already built relationships. We also had the pitch to make around tearing down our safety building and replacing it with a building that's more adequate to meet the needs of what we deal with each and every day. And so he was a real partner in us building some relationships over there, which are much needed. Yes?
Question about data. To what extent is Milwaukee using data and risk terrain modeling to really laser focus police resources, social services resources in the areas that need it most? I was looking at data recently in another major city. They divided it into little grids, 110,000 of them, and it was 40 grids in that city that really had the largest propensity to see serious acts of violence. How successfully is Milwaukee doing that right now, and where are there areas, opportunities for improvement?
It's a really good question. So the question is about how is data, I think if I'm saying it right, how is data gathered and analyzed here in this community to really identify the areas of the community that need the resources, where are things working, and how do we know that? How do we know anything's working? So we've got a good collaborative that developed out of the pandemic that is, it's called, the acronym is VRFAST, and it's violence reduction, and it's all of the other, with the health, it's a public health model essentially around violence reduction. So it's with the medical college, and it's examining certain areas in our city by neighborhood, by block, incidents, what's happening, how many violence interrupters are being deployed in those neighborhoods, what the impact of it is. This is a group that meets every other week, and it's a good cross-section of the community that includes, law enforcement, people on the ground level, medical college. Medical college is very much involved in a lot of this work, increasingly so, and I think that's a good thing. Children's Hospital has had involvement in this space for some time, and that's important too. So could we continue to improve that? I think we can. I think anyone in that space would say we've still got improvements to make there. It's similar to what we're doing in our system with regard to what I referred to earlier was the individuals who we try to assess to figure out, are you a good candidate for a deferred prosecution or not? Again, that's something we didn't have in our system 10 years ago or 12 years ago to even assess who we were looking at. And so, yeah, I think we made a lot of progress in the last 10 years or so. Could it get better? I think we would all say it can get better. It has to get better.
But we have the right people at the table. I mean, the medical college is an incredible resource here. The foundations are often locally, you know, Bader, Greater Milwaukee Foundation, Zilber is a good one around examining what's happening in the neighborhoods that they're investing in, and how does that work with what's going on with policing, and how does that work with housing. I think, again, we've got a pretty good eye on the homelessness problem here, which is really important. That's been a model that ended up, I think, is viewed nationally as a leading model. So there is a lot of focus around, you know, where are the resources going in neighborhoods, and are we seeing a difference, and where else do we need to channel those resources? But yeah, it can always improve. There's no question about it. But there's a lot more of it happening than there was even 5 years ago, I would say, and that's good to see. That's good to see. You know, I would say we have to figure out the economic problem here in this city, though. Quite frankly, we do. We just have a level of poverty that's unacceptable. It's just unacceptable. We have this wealth gap that's just, and as you know, everyone in this room knows how. You know, what's the building block of building wealth in America? It's home ownership, or it's property ownership. And we have far too many people that don't have that experience. They haven't had it. And if you don't have it, it's hard to get ahead here in this community, and not just here, anywhere. And we have, as we all know, wealth is built over generation, right? We all know the time value of money. All of those things we know, but if you have nothing to start with, to build from, to begin with, you're consistently starting from a really negative position, and we have a lot of people in that situation. We just do, and we have to figure out how to get people engaged in the economic marketplace here with jobs. And I'm not saying they're not there. I don't quite know the answer to that. All I can say is, what I do know is that crime doesn't thrive in neighborhoods where there are high rates of employment and high rates of housing stability. It just doesn't. It doesn't thrive here. It doesn't thrive in Shorewood where I live. It doesn't. So but in the areas where it's thriving, where crime is thriving, there isn't strong rates of home ownership or family sustaining employment. So easier said than done. I understand that. Yes.
Let's take one last question. And also, we're going to pitch in for the coffee crew this morning who are not here. So if anybody has a mug, can you just put it over there, and we're going to run one last load of dishes for them.
Okay, and I'm happy to stick around a little too today. Sure. Go ahead.
Could you speak a little bit more about homelessness?
So I think the county has got so the question was about homelessness. The county has a they have a housing department that focuses on homelessness. And, you know, there's been a lot of work done, started, 10 years ago or so with the panhandling issue, and that has been to put people into some sort of housing that's, the initiative that we adopted here in Milwaukee was called Housing First. And the idea is that many have the co-occurring issue of mental health concerns along with the housing issue, homelessness issue. So the issue, traditionally, often people were not allowed into housing, subsidized housing I'm talking about, unless they had kicked their addiction. And that was proving to be an impossibility for most. And what some cities had already worked on and seen positive results from was putting people into the housing piece first to stabilize themselves, knowing that they're still working on their addiction, and perhaps not being completely sober would not be an automatic exit from their subsidized housing. And so we've seen a lot of that employed here with regard to the emergency level housing the housing director would be a great person to bring here. We've worked very closely together over the years. And our space in that was with our community prosecutors. We in neighborhoods would walk with the housing outreach coordinators to find homeless people who are panhandling and give them the opportunity to get into some sort of housing, which many of them have and succeeded in maintaining a level of stable housing. And what our part of it was, if you had a warrant for disorderly conduct, minor things we're talking about, low-level sort of nuisance-related activity, we could talk to a judge and have that, dealt with without that person going to jail, if they were willing to avail themselves of the housing option right there on the spot. And we've seen a lot of success with that. And in fact, one reason we've had more success here than in some other cities is because our office has been involved with that piece, that criminal justice piece, to try to, bring a little practicality to it again. At the end of the day, if we're trying to address people who are more likely to be victims than offenders and not likely to hurt somebody, but are out here causing everybody discomfort, this has been a way that we've brought people to a more stable place in their lives. All right, is that it?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Audio attention.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
You said, Ken said he would stay if anyone.
Yeah, I'll
has-
stick around.
Yeah.